Have you ever spent literally hours trying to perfect a paragraph? Have you ever hesitated to send a draft to your supervisor because it's just not good enough yet? Have you ever missed a fairly important deadline because you were so busy perfecting something that it seemed better to just not hand it in than hand in something that was substandard? If so, you are probably a little bit of a perfectionist. Please be assured that you are not alone. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Yardley, and I've been supporting graduate and PhD students for the last 20 years, and I have seen a lot of perfectionism in that time. And whilst attention to detail and high standards are really good things to see in PhD students, you need to be careful that you don't take it too far, because you are just going to end up sabotaging yourself. In this video, I'm going to explore why we experience perfectionism and some of the things that you can do to stop it from holding you back. Okay, let's get straight into it. So firstly, why are you a perfectionist? And it's really important to look at this because understanding where perfectionism comes from is something that we need to get our heads around if any of the strategies that I'm going to share later are actually going to work. The function of perfectionism is essentially to protect ourselves from criticism. We have this fear of embarrassment and humiliation, and that leads us to believe that critique is bad. It's something dangerous. It's something that will cause us to be embarrassed or feel humiliated. Being criticised reveals the fact that we are not perfect, that we have flaws, that we make mistakes, that we make errors, and heaven forbid anybody actually discover that. It goes hand in hand with imposter syndrome. Now, I did a video about that recently, so I'll link to that up here. And imposter syndrome, in a nutshell, is about not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy, not feeling like you deserve to be on this postgraduate programme or on this doctoral programme. And you convince yourself that you're only here because you've been lucky, you've just been fortunate so far. And perfectionism becomes part of this because you just keep working on things until you get it perfect, because handing something in that's perfect is going to hold off that critique, yeah? So keep going at it, keep working on it, keep improving it, because you don't want to hand in something that is not perfect, because that is going to reveal the fact that you are this massive imposter, that you don't deserve to be here, and it's all going to come crashing down around you. And if you keep working on something until you get it perfect, and then when you hand it in, it's perfect, nobody's going to criticise you, nobody's going to expose you, everything's going to be fine. And in fact, people will only congratulate you when you hand in a perfect piece of work, and you're going to get all of this positive validation. We want that validation, we don't want to displease people, and we tell ourselves that people will be displeased with us if we give them something that isn't perfect. So if we give our supervisor a draft that isn't perfect, if we submit an article to a journal and that article isn't perfect, if we apply for funding and our funding application isn't perfect, people are going to be displeased with us, and it's just going to lead us to failure. But that is a complete load of nonsense, okay? Now, the reason why that is a complete load of nonsense is what we're going to look at now. Academia is all about criticism. By its very nature, it's critical because the whole point of academia is the critique of ideas. So to be in it is to be critical and be criticised. You've been in a lecture or a seminar, or you've had a conversation with somebody at college or uni where you have absolutely torn somebody else's work to shreds. You have. You will have looked at a study or a theory and you would have come to the conclusion, yeah, I'm not convinced by this because this argument is full of holes, it doesn't stack up, there isn't sufficient evidence, it's not logical. That is critique, okay? You have been critical of other people's work, and that's fine because that's what academia is all about. Criticising other people's work has played a huge role in getting you to the point that you're at now. Because that is the whole damn point of academia. It is to test ideas, to interpret ideas, to evaluate ideas. So the number one thing that we really need to accept is that criticism is just part and parcel of life in academia. Criticism is what we want because that is the only way that we're going to get any better at what we're doing. So we need to welcome it in, we need to embrace it. If we accept that it's normal, it's everyday, it's desirable, that is going to allow us to let go of our perfectionism. And a really important part of that is accepting that criticism is not personal. Think back to what I said earlier. The fact that you have criticised other people's work. And if you remember the kind of things you were saying, the kind of arguments that you were making when you were doing so, you were not personally attacking that person. You weren't questioning their worth as a human being. You weren't questioning their fundamental value. You were criticising their work. You were looking at their arguments, you were looking at their evidence, and you were going, nah, I'm not convinced by that. It was all about their work, okay? It wasn't about them. Because them as individuals, them as human beings, that's irrelevant. We are focusing on their work. What matters are their ideas. Are they credible? Do they stack up? Do they make sense? Is their contribution original? Is their approach rigorous? Is what they say supported by evidence? None of that is about them. It's all about their work. So you need to learn to separate yourself from your work. Your value as a human being is not conditional on the work that you produce as a scholar. And in turn, your value as a scholar is not based on the quality of draft 3 of your methodology chapter, okay? It's not all contingent on this one thing. It's a collection of things. Originality, rigor, evidence, all of that kind of stuff. Perfect is not an objective thing. We need to dismantle this notion of something can be perfect because it cannot be perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect piece of academic work. It's a standard that you will never be able to achieve, and it's a standard that no academic has ever been able to achieve. So it's something that we just need to let go of because it is not helpful for us. Even the highest profile, most widely published, highly cited scholars in your field cannot produce a perfect piece of work. And you already know this, okay? You have read journal articles and books by people that you really respect and admire, and you have probably looked at part of that journal article or a chapter of that book and thought, yeah, you've taken like 4 pages to say something that you could have said in 1 paragraph, or the evidence that you've given to support this particular argument is not very convincing, or there will be part of the book, the journal article, that you just don't understand. So they have not been able to convey effectively what they want to get across in that particular part of the book or the journal article. So even the people that you put up on a pedestal are not producing perfect work. And if we're really, really honest about it, that's quite an obvious thing, because you've done a literature review, okay, or you're in the process of doing a literature review, and you found fault, you have found flaws, you found holes in evidence and flaws in logic in those things that you've looked at. Perfect isn't real, so let's stop trying to be perfect because it's something that we're never going to achieve. Instead of aiming for perfection, identify some more realistic goals like writing more concisely, improving the structure of your work, making sure that you're getting your referencing correct, or evidencing your arguments in a more convincing way. Those things are what you should be striving for. Those should be your goals, not perfection. The goal of your PhD, your postgrad thesis, whatever, is not to achieve perfection. The goal of those things is to make an original contribution to knowledge. And this brings me on to the idea of goals and keeping our goals in mind, because keeping your goals in mind is such an important thing to do if you are trying to overcome perfectionism. Pay attention to your behaviour when you're working on a task and you can feel your perfectionism creeping in. Make sure that you are not losing sight of your goal because your perfectionist tendencies are getting in the way and they are taking over. So, for example, say today your goal is to write 1,000 words to send your supervisor on a particular part of your literature review. That's your goal. Write 1,000 words, send it to your supervisor. So you write 1,000 words, but there is something that stops you sending it to your supervisor. And you will then go and fiddle around with it and swap things in it and change things in it and spend literally an hour perfecting a specific paragraph. So somewhere along the line, your goal has changed, hasn't it? Your original goal was to write 1,000 words of your literature review and send that to your supervisor. However, you have changed that goal and you have turned it into a new goal, which is to write a perfect 1,000 words. Now that is not what you set out to do, was it? So when you're working on tasks like that, make sure that you regularly stop yourself and you revisit the goal. Remind yourself of what it is that you're actually trying to achieve. And also in that example, when you send that draft to your supervisor, be really clear on what it is that you need their feedback on. So you might say to them, I just want you to let me know if I've understood this particular concept. I know that the structure of this 1,000 words is a bit all over the place. The grammar's probably a bit dodgy. I'm going to get to that later. But in terms of what I want your feedback on, I'd like the feedback on this specific thing, my understanding of this concept. And by being really clear with your supervisor in this way, you are improving your relationship with them in terms of expectations on both sides. But I'm kind of going off on a bit of a tangent here, and I did do another video recently on supervisors and all kinds of issues with supervisors. So I will pop that up here and I will just shut up. Okay, so let's recap the 5 things that we've covered about all things perfectionism in this video. Firstly, why you're a perfectionist. Secondly, academia is all about criticism, so we need to actually expect that and invite it and want it. Thirdly, criticism in academia is not personal. It's about your work, it's not about you. Fourthly, perfection is not real. It's not a standard that any of us can ever achieve, so we've just got to let go of it. And fifthly and lastly, keeping our focus on our real goal, on the thing that we actually set out to do, is going to be incredibly helpful to us in terms of leaving our perfectionism behind. I hope you found this helpful. Drop any questions in the comments and be sure to tune in a few days when I will be giving you another video full of tips and advice and guidance on how to navigate the messy and the magical of the PhD journey. I'll see you then.